Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 11 key game picks. Before we get into week number 11, a little quick thoughts, NFL whip around from week number 10. And obviously, it still kind of boils down to two NFL teams that just, I don't know if I want to say one is amazing and one is just flat out very, very lucky. Now, probably the amazing part of this NFL team, the Detroit Lions, after coming back from a deficit in Houston, when it looked like the Houston Texans were going to give the Lions a loss, and then more likely they would have to regroup. The Lions came storming back, and they really just took that game from the Texans when it really looked like the Texans had total control of that Sunday night game. And then the Lions just snatched it from them. And their kicker Bates, man, how about that? 58-yarder to tie the game and a 52-yarder to win the game that just barely made it through the goalpost. When it looked like it could have hit the goalpost, it would have been it would have doinked and all that. But really, this Detroit Lions team, this 2024 team, it's very hard to say to compare them, which this team probably has more heart than their team from last year. But you have to remember, their team from last year made it to the NFC title game, but just came up short. We don't know somewhere down the line where this team as of right now, they only have one loss. And they still have some tough games ahead, and they still have a couple of games that can maybe consider trap games for them. But really right now at the moment, this is the team of the NFC right now that possibly more likely the team to beat. But when you look at other football teams in the NFC conference, like the Washington Commanders, they're making a name for themselves, even though they lost to Pittsburgh. And it was a great game between them and the Steelers. It's just some miscues and mostly the miscues basically killed that Commanders team, and the Steelers took advantage of it, and they ended up winning. And the Eagles dismantling the Cowboys, dismantling the Cowboys. You got the big showdown coming up in the NFC East between Washington and Philadelphia. That's going to be one of the key games I will get into. And when I look at other things that went around, the San Francisco 49ers basically also had to come from behind to beat the Buccaneers. Basically, it was a game that totally was really, I don't know if the 49ers had more heart in there to win or Baker Mayfield, because that was a game that really, Baker Mayfield, despite not having basically talent around him, tried to win the football game all by himself. 49ers, though, in the end, they got McCaffrey back. He did make a slight difference, and in the passing game, Brock Purdy probably had one of his better games all season. But when you look at, going into the luckiest team right now, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, once again escaped and basically got lucky on a blocked field goal in the end to stop the Broncos. Would for sure look like they were going to hand the Chiefs their first loss of the season, and obviously putting the champagne for the corks to be open for the 72 Dolphins. But obviously now that those champagne bottles are now sealed and shut for another week, it'll be interesting to see what will happen in the big showdown between the Chiefs and the Bills, if the Bills have maybe one of the last few teams that could probably give them a loss. Well, when I look at what else happened around the NFL, basically it just boils down to right now the Lions might be the best team in the NFC, and obviously the Chiefs, until somebody knocks them off the pedestal, they're still the team to beat in the AFC regardless. Even though the Ravens, they beat the Bengals, obviously they had a hard time beating the Bengals, which I expected. It was going to be a shootout when it looked like the Bengals had total control, but I knew sooner or later that the Ravens would catch up to them. There's a lot that went on in week number 10, but let's get into week number 11, shall we? Going into week number 11, here are the 4 key games here, and these ones are big. These games I'm about to talk about are really big. And of course, my first key game I'm going to talk about here, going to the NFC East. It's the NFC showdown between the Commanders versus the Eagles. Now, keep in mind, what I have written down here in my paper, these are early lines going into this football game, so expect the numbers to change as I tape this right after Monday Night Football, as of the time I recorded this video and when it'll be uploaded uploaded on YouTube. The Eagles are a 3-point favorite. It would not surprise me if that number goes to 2.5, maybe 2. Jaden Daniels, 17 of 34, 202 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Obviously, the miscues really hurt the Commanders a lot more than basically the way that the Commanders and the Steelers, that game really went back and forth. And it was a game that I think Jaden Daniels really needed to have some sort of experience in games that can go back and forth. And now the real test is going to come going now into division play, going against the team that is they're vying for basically this is first place on the line for now and going into week 11. Who will be in first place here? Now Jalen Hurts was 14 of 20, 202 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception in the victory last week against the Cowboys, where basically the Cowboys are a mess and they're really not. They're basically just falling off the cellar. They're becoming an embarrassment. This game is a toss-up. It's a coin flip in this one here. Both teams both teams with Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts. They're mobile quarterbacks. They can make plays. I think it's going to boil down to the running game. What does Austin Eckler do for the Commanders? Can they get that running game going for the Commanders? And also the same thing for Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley and that Eagles running game as well. It is a very, very tough pick here. This game could go either way. But when I think about this football game, experience still matters. And that is one thing that the Eagles have had in this division and the way this team starting to come together. And even though Eagles fans are not liking it, especially they're giving a lot of heat to Coach Sirianni. This is a football team that might finally start breaking things together. And that is the reason why I feel the Eagles are going to barely beat the Commanders in this football game. I'm picking the Philadelphia Eagles at -3 here. I think to me it's going to be a very, very close game. This is definitely a Thursday night game that's definitely going to be worth watching. It will be the showdown for who will be in first place in the NFC East. It's a tough game to pick. It's a coin flip 50-50 pick on this one here. This game could go either way. But I just think the Eagles, with their more experience and the fact that they're finally getting things to click, I'm picking the Eagles in this game. I think the Eagles will take over first. They're already in first place right now, but I think they'll probably take command of first place if they beat the Commanders in this game. And that's what I'm going with. I'm going to pick the Eagles at -3 over the Commanders. Key game number 2. The big showdown in the AFC North. It is the Ravens versus the Steelers. The Ravens are a 3-point favorite, and expect that number to go down to 2.5, maybe 2. Lamar Jackson last week in a big comeback over the Bengals was 25 of 33, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. But obviously the running game of Derrick Henry, that really helped make the difference here after they struggled in the first half of that game against Cincy. And then finally getting the offense to click and basically came back and beat the Bengals. Now, the Steelers' Russell Wilson was 14 of 28, 195 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. It was a game that the Steelers barely won because given the fact that the Commanders really kept up with the Steelers, and T.J. Watt really did not have a good game in terms of rushing the quarterback. So now this boils down to the point when I think about Pittsburgh's defense and whether T.J. Watt will get to Lamar Jackson or they could put a stop to any sort of running game of Derrick Henry. That's going to be the real test in this football game for the Steelers here. Now, injuries-wise, both teams going into this with very few injuries. And this game is another coin flip. This is basically for first place in the AFC. Basically, it'll be a tie for first place, but whoever wins this game will have the advantage going into week 12. It's a very, very tough pick here because given the fact that Russell Wilson has brought life into that Steelers offense and given the fact signing Mike Williams really helps them at wide receiver, and both teams are about evenly matched here. But my concerns also rely on the Ravens defense. They really struggled in the first half against Cincy, but held it together in the second half and were able to, and their offense was able to come back and win the game against the Bengals. So I do have some slight concerns on their defense. That's going to be a big question mark going into this football game, given the fact the Steelers' defense is a little bit better. But if they cannot stop Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in terms of their offense in here, I like the Ravens in this game. I think, to me, the Ravens have been waiting for this game for a long time. I knew going into this, it was probably going to be for first place at stake in the division. And the way it's looking at it right now, look, I looked at the Ravens are still trying to prove themselves as one of the teams to beat in the AFC. And Pittsburgh's trying to make their case as well. But when I look at this football game here, if the defense has trouble stopping Henry, and if they had a hard time getting to Jalen Daniels of the Commanders, I wonder if it's going to be the same thing against Lamar Jackson, because that Ravens offensive line has been pretty good all season. And I'm going with the Ravens here. I think the Ravens will take over first place in the division. It'll be a first place tie, but they'll have the advantage going into Week 12 as first place in the AFC North. It's a 50-50 pick. I don't know who wins this football game. It's a big game for both these two teams. Finally, they're meeting for first place at stake in the division. But I think the Ravens, they're trying to send a message that if they're going to win the AFC North, they got to go through them. I'm leaning towards the Ravens. It's a tough pick here, but I'm going with the Ravens at -3 in this one here. I'm picking the Ravens over the Steelers. Key game number 3. It is the Seahawks versus the 49ers. This is the second time I've talked about these two teams in my videos. And obviously because the NFC West is a jumbled mess. The only team that's been really has a little bit more consistency has been the Arizona Cardinals. And they currently control first place. When I look at this football game here, there's no question for the Seahawks. They're now in an elimination game right here. This basically could be it for Seattle because they need this game badly. The 49ers are with a record of 5-4. They're trying to keep pace in that NFC West division, which is very winnable right now, given the fact that all 4 teams' records are nearly 500, except for the Seahawks. And obviously the Rams lost to the Dolphins in Monday Night Football. There's only 2 teams that are over 500, and that's the Cardinals and the 49ers. Big question marks here for the Seahawks, given their injuries and the way Geno Smith played in Week 9. He was 21 of 34, 363 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions in that bad loss to the Rams. Brock Purdy was 25 of 36, 353 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The 49ers are favored at 6.5. And I would say that's about right because there's too many question marks with Seattle's offense, and they are they're imploding. They're basically right now a mess. And it could have come at a worse time now with the 49ers starting to finally get their offense going, but they struggled with the Buccaneers, and it kind of does give the Seahawks a little bit of some hope. But if McCaffrey has a big game in this one here in that running game to help ease off of any pressure for Brock Purdy, that definitely will help the 49ers offense, and also to help out Deebo Samuel in terms of the passing game, and George Kittle also in the pass receiving. I'm picking the 49ers here at -6.5. I think Seattle they're a mess right now, and the game that the Seahawks really need in order to have any hope of contention to win that division. And obviously the way the playoff seedings are going into Week 11, the Seahawks right now, they can only win the division to get into the postseason, and this is really an elimination game for them. But it's the 49ers that are more of a better team here. I'm picking the 49ers at -6.5. They'll beat the Seahawks. And finally, key game number 4, it's the big one. The Chiefs versus the Bills. The Bills are actually a 2.5 point favorite in this one here, and expect that number to go to 2, maybe 1.5. Patrick Mahomes, 28 of 42, 266 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. Basically surviving. Basically that field goal block, they barely survived. Patrick Mahomes had a pretty decent game, even though despite the fact they barely beat the Broncos. And there's always been a lot of question marks regarding their offense and what vulnerabilities they have if any sort of defense. The Broncos defense really did a fantastic job of holding them alive because they only scored 16 points. But if there's one thing that keeps saving the Chiefs is really Steve Spagnuolo's defense. That's one of the reasons why the Chiefs are winning, because their defense has kept them in football games, and they've done a fantastic job of holding opponents. Their defense is averaging opponents to at least 20 points, and that's pretty good. Now the question goes for the Buffalo Bills in this game here. Josh Allen was 22 of 37, 280 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. in a game that they beat the Colts, but that was their first victory in Indianapolis in a long time. The interceptions are piling up for the Bills here, and this is concerning. Josh Allen really hasn't, in the first half of the season, did not throw many interceptions, but the interceptions are piling up here, and that is a huge concern. And other concerns now for the Bills and their offense. Coleman, one of their wide receivers, Coleman, injured his wrist against the Colts. He's going to be out for this game. And also, we don't know the status of Kincaid. That's also a factor now for Buffalo's offense. And really right now, Amari Cooper is going to have to really be a factor in this game. And this is a little bit of trouble for the Bills' offense here. This could not have come at a worse time when they're trying to prove themselves and trying to stop the Chiefs from going undefeated. Obviously, there's still there's a lot of bad blood in this rivalry here. And it's been possibly the new Brady Manning rivalry in the NFL. But really, the Chiefs have had the Bills' number, which is really funny. The Chiefs have owned the Bills in the playoffs, but when it comes to regular season, Josh Allen has owned Patrick Mahomes in the regular season, but really, the postseason counts more. Patrick Mahomes still has the upper hand. It's going to be tough for this Bills team going into this game. I expect this game to be low scoring. I don't think it'll be a shootout here, but it could be like a 20-17 type of game, or maybe a 17-14 type of game. It's really Kansas City's defense is going to make the difference in this football game. I see them I'm going to pick the Chiefs here. I just think the Bills not having Coleman and Kincaid really hurt them. And Amari Cooper, more than likely, is going to be double teamed. And you got to wonder if Josh Allen is going to have to win the football game all by himself. And really, the Bills' defense has to find a way to stop the run. Not only that, in terms of what Patrick Mahomes might do in the passing game or if he gets out of the pocket. I'm picking the Chiefs in this one here. I just think the Chiefs will beat the Bills here. I think the Chiefs remain undefeated. And I don't know if this could be motivation for the Bills going into the postseason, because it seems like the team between these two teams, the Bills win the regular season matchup, but then in the postseason, Patrick Mahomes gets the last laugh. So I don't know. This game really is kind of a toss-up, but really the Chiefs are the bit of the better team in this one here. I'm going to pick the Chiefs at +2.5. They're going to beat the Bills. So that's it, my friends, for my 4 key game picks for week number 11. Please check the description below for all of my week 11 picks. And I will talk to you guys next week when I make my football picks for week number 12. And until then, take care and enjoy your football weekend.